You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Incoming transmission.
You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Thank you for joining us today, Sunday, July the 29th in the year of our Lord 2018. And today, folks, ladies and gentlemen, today, we need to take a trip over the pond. Make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in the upright and locked position, because here we go. Alright, geez, God, every time I try to do a cool intro, it doesn't work out. Well, whatever. Anyway, we are shooting across the pond right now because the latest news that we have in from such wonderful sources, such reliable pieces of publication as the UK Business Insider and The Independent, is that UKIP, the UK Independence Party, will reportedly join Steve Bannon's foundation to spread far-right propaganda against Europe, and the EU is said to be spooked. They're a little bit scared about it. And wait, as we move along here, it gets even worse. We have The Independent calling this an unholy alliance. Yes, the UKIP is to team up in an unholy alliance with Steve Bannon's new far-right European movement. The party has pledged to share their experience with this new group. Now, shut that crap off. Yeah, there we go, kill that. Now, as we go into this article, as we dig into it a little bit further, it starts out with the definitive paragraph: UKIP has pledged to work with Steve Bannon's new European alt-right movement, forging what critics have branded an unholy alliance to bring down the EU and fuel populism across the continent. Now, if we take a look at the links here, this is a topical page from The Independent about UKIP, and this is a topical page about Steve Bannon, okay? There is no citation in paragraph or anywhere in the text of this article in The Independent to support the concept that the UK Independence Party is forming any kind of an alliance or team-up or cooperation with the new Bannon Eurosceptic organization. So, the Independent did what we call an attribution story. I'm sorry, the Independent did, from what I can see, a complete and total bullshit story, but the Business Insider did what we call an attribution story, where they basically take the same facts, rehash them slightly, okay, and then they throw a credit way down here at the bottom. Read the original article in The Independent, copyright 2018, etc., so on and so forth. So, we have The Independent putting out a BS hit piece insinuating some kind of deep-seated alliance between the UK Independence Party and now disgraced Former White House strategic advisor Steve Bannon, who apparently no longer works directly with President Trump, former head of Breitbart News, and then Business Insider just glommed onto it and said, "Oh, it's a sweet headline, my God." Okay, so hit piece, attribution story about said hit piece with absolutely no independent verification of the source. All right? Immediately followed by Gerard Batten on Twitter, who is a member of the European Parliament and leader of UKIP. So, not just some nobody, pops up fake news alert. UKIP has not entered into any alliance with Steve Bannon. Mr. Bannon has not contacted me. If he had, I would have been pleased to speak with him, but he didn't. Anyone claiming to speak for UKIP in this matter is speaking only for themselves. So, what would you think here? Would you think maybe he took a call from Nigel Farage? No, he didn't even talk to Nigel Farage, apparently. There is no follow-up actually being conducted, and this is spreading right now like wildfire through social media. You see, we go to Nigel Farage's Facebook page. Do you think maybe if there was a strategic alliance like this between Breitbart, Stephen Bannon, and UKIP, Nigel Farage, the poster boy for UKIP, might have something to say? But nope, nada, nothing. Nigel Farage has got nothing to say on that effect. Now we go to a couple of other bloggers like myself. We go to Zelo Street. And this is a Blogspot blog, so, throwing them some attention because, of course, they need it, just like all of us do. Let's see here. 1. The Indie did not claim that UKIP entered into any alliance with Bannon, although it said they would do. Okay, first paragraph of the story from The Independent. Verbatim. UKIP has pledged to work with Steve Bannon's new European alt-right movement, forging what critics have branded an unholy alliance. So, Zelo Street, you're out. 2. John Stone did not claim that Bannon had contacted Batten. Kind of hard to forge an alliance with somebody if you don't contact him, isn't it? 3. If he can't keep tabs on what his party spokespersons are up to, that's his problem, not that of the press. And 4. The fake news is only coming from him. I'm sorry, we are talking about the leader of UKIP. If you're talking about a strategic alliance with another political organization, the leader's going to be aware of it. So yes, fake news, ladies and gentlemen, no longer purely a product of the United States, has been successfully exported to the United Kingdom of Great Britain. And now you have people screaming, howling, and braying that UKIP has become aligned with Steve Bannon and, by extension, the alt-right. And it goes, Politico.eu, Steve Bannon, Europe, Brussels, plans populist. Europe's far-right doesn't bear hug Stephen back. His European partners are ambivalent, saying they want to keep the controversial American at arm's length, even as they seek to tap his expertise on how to disrupt politics on the continent. The initial reception signals potential limits on a Bannon push into the old world. So let's take this apart, okay? You have Steve Bannon, who is looking to develop a wide, far-right populist movement in Europe, which is Eurosceptic, aimed at disrupting and ending the European Union. Very America first of him, won't you say? Now, realize that this man is, in many views, a fallen star. People do not want to be associated with him because associating with Stephen Bannon loses you credibility in most proper political circles these days. So would it behoove the left in the UK, which, by the way, has the Independent and the Business Insider bought, sold, and paid for lock, stock, and barrel, would it behoove them to insinuate, let alone outright say in the lead paragraph with no supporting evidence, proof, or in-paragraph links or citation, that you are linking the two? Okay? This is almost the equivalent of President Trump retweeting Britain First. Because the term alt-right has become poisoned by the likes of neo-Nazis and white supremacists here in the United States and abroad, by Identity Europa. These groups have basically taken the alt-right completely out of any hope of mainstream acceptability. So by saying that UKIP is now embracing Steve Bannon, the poster child, as it were, for the alt-right movement, when he himself said back in 2016 he wanted to make Breitbart the home of the alt-right on the internet, I may be paraphrasing there a bit, forgive me, but that was his big deal, is that he wanted to make Breitbart the alt-right news outlet. This alignment is designed to do one thing and one thing only. Stop the spread of UKIP, because they are moving like wildfire right now through the British electorate, because the British electorate on the left and on the right have completely had it with the Liberal Democrats and also the Labourites and Conservative Party. They have all failed in the British parliamentary system, and UKIP is looking better by the minute, and it's leaving a lot of people like me, libertarians here in the U.S., constitutionalists here in the U.S., asking, what is the U.S. equivalent to UKIP? When we see people like Count Dankula on YouTube, and Sargon of Akkad, and Milo Yiannopoulos, and Paul Joseph Watson, his name escaped me for a second because I don't listen to him. When we see these prominent figures on the right joining UKIP, that kind of causes us to sit back and go, wow, what is the U.S. equivalent to the UK Independence Party? Certainly not the American Independence Party. I mean, they pretty much fell off the map years ago. The Constitution Party, I've spoken to on a number of occasions, seem to be filling a niche here in the United States, but have not gained wide adoption. You have the Federalist Party, which I reviewed with everybody during our third-party problems segment. If you want to go back a couple of podcasts, you can find that on www.theholonet.com or theholonet.lanterns.buzz, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, anywhere you find podcasts, you can check that out. That's the third-party problems podcast, by the way. But where do we find the U.S. alternative to the Democrats, who are now essentially the Democratic Socialists, and the Republicans, who have basically become big government establishment Republicans, who seem, in all earnestness, to be dedicating themselves to two things: saving their own skin come November, first and foremost, and keeping a muzzle and a leash on President Trump as long as they can. Because they're discovering that the president is very difficult for them to control, and he does not align, I would say probably even 50%, with their long-term goals. Because if the Republican Party here in the United States had the long-term goal of small government, when you have a majority in both houses of Congress, when you have a president of the United States in office, when you have now a majority in the Supreme Court of the United States, as soon as Kavanaugh's in, they're about to have a really solid majority, and you fail to act, what does that say about you? That says that you have principles and you have goals that simply exist for you to be reelected. You don't have a plan to win. You only have a plan to get elected. Let me see if I can pull a quote from Ted Cruz here. He said it quite nicely.
The American people are frustrated because their elected officials don't listen. When we're home on the campaign trail, we say we listen. And yet something about this Senate floor, something about Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's the water, something in the air, the cherry blossoms, but people get here and they stop listening to the American people.
That's it right there. That's it right there. Your Republican congressmen and senators and state congressmen, your governors, everyone who is in the establishment party of the Republican Party, the good old boys, we used to call them, the GOP, the grand old party, have those goals when it's time to vote for them, when it's time to crack open your wallet and give your very legal maximum And then when that runs out too, hey, we have this really great PAC you can donate to. But that is the only time when the Republican Party seems to listen to us folks here on the right, to we constitutionalists, we small government Republicans, the libertarians, the people who want maximum liberty, minimum government, the people who strive for individualism, not collectivism, and who want true fiscal responsibility out of Washington, D.C. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to jump back across the pond to the U.S., and we're going to talk about Austin, Texas, where they're seemingly having a bit of an identity crisis. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Hey, we are live right now on Facebook.com/HoloNet if you want to check us out there. You can also catch us on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, as well, any other place where you get quality podcasts. Find us online, www.theholonet.com, and of course, theholonet.lanterns.buzz. Now, moving right along to things back here in the United States, and it doesn't get much more United States than Texas, deep in the heart of Texas. Anyway, Austin is considering renaming the city to depart from Confederate history. I had a little trouble reading that the first time through, because my brain can only accept a certain level of dumb. This is coming from Newsweek magazine. Janice Williams says, the city of Austin, Texas, has suggested in a preliminary report that highlighted historical connections to a former Confederate leader, Stephen F. Austin, otherwise known as the Father of Texas, that it might consider changing its name. This is in addition to identifying several neighborhoods and towns linked to the Confederacy. The report released by Texas's Equity Office suggested name changes for city streets honoring the Confederacy and Confederate leaders, including slave owner William Barton, the Austin American-Statesman reported Friday. Here's a suggestion, Texas. How about this for a really crazy suggestion? How about what in the ever-loving hell are you doing having an Office of Equity? The Texas Equity Office? Are you serious? Did you find your state to be so unequal, so very racist, so very transphobic, so very homophobic that you needed to have an entire state office dedicated to equity? I thought Texas was the last outpost, the last stand of small government. Austin, you disappoint me. Austin, who founded the city in 1839, was notable for his staunch disapproval of an effort to ban slavery in the Tejas province following the Texas Revolution. As well as the name of the city, dozens of local entities in and surrounding it were highlighted as potentially problematic, including Pease Park, the Bolden Creek neighborhood, and a slew of places and landmarks named for Barton. The report also highlighted Dixie Drive, Confederate Avenue, Littlefield Street, Tom Green Street, Sneed Cove, Reagan Hill Drive, and Plantation Road. Any changes would have to be approved by the Texas Historical Commission. It previously sanctioned the renaming of Robert E. Lee Road to A.Z. Morton Road and Jeff Davis Avenue to William Holland Avenue in April. The suggestions in Austin are just the latest development in nationwide scrutiny of the Confederate legacy. At least 110 publicly supported Confederate monuments and symbols across the U.S. have been removed since 2015. Also previously covered on theholonet.com. If you check out theholonet.com, we have a nice piece on that called Deconfederation, which actually referred to this movement to erase our collective memory of the American Civil War. I'll call it the first American Civil War because it feels like the second one's brewing. Here in my own state of Arizona. And ladies and gentlemen, we cannot erase the past. We cannot sanitize our history. Ben Shapiro of the Daily Caller is very fond of saying, facts don't care about your feelings. History doesn't care about your damn feelings either. Cities are named after founders and conquerors. At the end of the day, these founders were imperfect men in imperfect times. I will not dispute here that Stephen F. Austin had flawed views. But if you fail to consider his views in the context of his time, and I reject that this is an apologist argument, because it is only common sense. The views of the man can only be considered through the lens of his time. Stephen F. Austin was a patriot for Texas, and he jealously guarded the best interests of Texas, not of the United States at that time, but of Texas. Were his views flawed? Hell yes. Looking back, I can point to many founding fathers who had a very flawed view of the world. But to fail to consider the time in which they lived is to read something without context. You must contextualize these historical figures in the times and places in which they lived and view through that lens. That is the only way to objectivity. Context is for kings. And that's what drives me nuts. That's what drives me nuts about this entire move by Austin, Texas. This seeming identity crisis that Austin, Texas is now having. Because Austin is traditionally a southern city. Yes, Texas was one of the powerhouses of the Confederacy. So are we going to change the name of Six Flags now to Five Flags because one of those flags is the Stars and Bars? Is that next? Can't go to Six Flags. You know what that sixth flag is for? Well, the sixth one technically is the United States, you jerk. The fifth one is the Confederacy. Is this our future? To collectively forget, willfully disavow our own past because it's ugly. American history is a grand tapestry. But it loses something, intrinsically, if you take out the ugly parts. If you teach American history without the proper context, and without a full recognition and understanding of the horrible things that happened in our past, coupled alongside the brilliant innovation, the beautiful art, the astonishing acts of humanity, of mercy, of grace, if you fail to consider them all alongside each other, in their proper order, you lose the very essence, the intrinsic nature of what it is to be American. And this applies across all histories. I can say the exact same for the British Empire. Should you erase and disavow all of the crimes of the British Crown? No. Absolutely not. You have to remember them, lest they be repeated. But can you dismiss the civilizing effect that the British people had on the world at large? That they brought the light of Western civilization to the North American continent? That they brought the nations of Africa further along, probably, than any European power at that time? Was it all 100% altruistic? No. Are you kidding me? Africa got the short end of the stick in the 1800s. You want to get some good reading, good listening, check out Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, which at one time was one of the most advanced nations in Africa, and largely untouched by colonization and by foreign influence. That didn't last long, but it's a good example. You cannot look at the history of India without acknowledging the technological differences that the British East India Company and the Maharajas made to Indian history. And I've spoken to many people in India who are distinct Anglophiles, who revere the British culture, who aspire to it, because they understand that you have to take the good and the bad together. You cannot ignore the evils of our history. You have to acknowledge them. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at what is up and coming in the news today, what's trending on Twitter, and give an eye to what we have to look forward to this coming week as we enter the month of August. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Holloway, and I hope you're enjoying our podcast so far. It's been exciting putting this together for you, and I'm looking forward to many more to come. I did want to let you know that in setting up the HoloNet and getting everything launched here, we've gone ahead and set up a page on Patreon.com. Now, if you haven't heard of Patreon, Patreon is a website that's similar to other crowdfunding sources that allows you to support on a month-to-month basis those sources, those artists, and those groups that you really care about and that you're passionate about. And I hope that we can ignite passion in a lot of people to become more involved in the political process, and also to become involved in the conversation and to keep that political dialogue alive. So I'd like to humbly ask you today to consider becoming a patron of the HoloNet on Patreon.com, and you can access that at Patreon.com/theHoloNet. We have various levels of patronage. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, which unlocks exclusive content for the Patreon community, such as a feed of patron-only content. Then you have a $5 option, which gives you behind-the-scenes access to blog about the different inspirations that we have. It'll give you access to patrons-only polling. And then we have a $10 option, which gives you a signed digital poster plus everything else. $20 option, which gives you name in the credits on the site, and all other rewards. And we even have a segment sponsor package available on Patreon, which is $125 a month, which entitles you and your business to a 60-second ad as a segment sponsor during the podcast, of course, subject to content approval. So if you would like to become a patron of the HoloNet, we would be greatly thankful to you, and it's going to go toward a solid cause of generating this sort of millennial constitutional conservative content that is so lacking in our media today. So thank you for your time, for your consideration, and for being a part of the HoloNet. Here we hold the line against the night, and the millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network, coming into the last half hour here for this week. According to The Hill, President Trump blasts the media in calling journalists very unpatriotic for reporting on government affairs. President Trump on Sunday unleashed a tirade against the media, in which he called reporters unpatriotic for reporting the inner workings of the government. In a series of tweets, the president singled out the New York Times, the Washington Post, for writing bad stories about his administration, which he amounted to selling out their country. He said, 90% of media coverage of my administration is negative, despite the tremendously positive results we are achieving. It's no surprise that confidence in the media is at an all-time low. I will not allow our great country to be sold out by anti-Trump haters in the dying newspaper industry, he added. No matter how much they try to distract and cover up, our country is making great progress under my leadership, and I will never stop fighting for the American people. They say Trump, who had a testy relationship with the media since declaring his candidacy, often seeks to discredit coverage he dislikes as fake news. Well, folks, this is nothing new. This is absolutely nothing new. President Trump versus the media has been the name of the game since he declared his candidacy for the election, coming down the escalator at Trump Tower, 2 years ago? If they're just figuring this out now, they're a little bit late to the party. And there's always been a very tenuous relationship between the press and the White House, typically when a conservative president is in power. Look back to the Bush years. Incredibly poor presentation of the administration during the Bush years. Very, very ultra-critical. And then the Obama administration, softball. The left slant of the American media has been so flagrantly obvious that the American people, we don't even look for anything different. We expect it. What is different about this president is he is calling attention to it. Is the media undermining the negotiating position of the United States on the international stage? Yes. Are they applying the appropriate scrutiny to the current administration's government? I would say yes, if that same level of scrutiny was applied to every administration. If it had been applied to the Obama administration, if it had been applied to the Clinton administration even, where coverage of Monica Lewinsky seemed to be an if I have to, I guess kind of an affair. It seems to me that the press works very, very hard to establish itself as the watchdog of the American people during conservative administrations, and then joins the rest of the left in celebrating the achievements of the progressive left whenever a liberal is in office. So is it any wonder, as the president said, that people's trust in the media is at an all-time low? It shouldn't be. Trust in the media is very low. Trust in the government is low. We don't trust the government to tell us what it's doing, and we don't trust the media to tell us what the government is doing. What this is leading to is citizen journalism. Citizen reporting. You know, the type that got Tommy Robinson locked up in the UK. The type that over the pond right now is getting people thrown in prison. We are very fortunate, very lucky here in the United States to actually be able to benefit from our freedom of the press and freedom of speech. Guard it very, very carefully. Another big question that's come up this week, and this is coming off of CBS News, by the way, who recently released a poll that Americans are wary of the Trump tariffs' impact, but support plan to aid the farmers. I'm very wary of this. Okay? The short-term effects of the tariffs are negative, according to 51% of all Americans and 51% of farm and agricultural workers. The long-term effects of tariffs, most Americans, all Americans rather, say will better trade deals 36%, worse trade deals 41%. Farmers say 41% it'll result in better trade deals, 42% say worse trade deals. Now, the $12 billion in aid to farmers who have been hurt by the tariffs that President Trump is seeking to line up, 78% of Republicans favor this, only 22% oppose it, 34% of Democrats favor it, 66% of Democrats oppose it. So here's my question, okay? If you don't believe in redistribution of wealth, can you support the president's aid plan for farmers? How does that sit with a small government fiscal conservative? Now, this is kind of a cause and effect problem. The actions of the President of the United States, the protectionist actions of the tariffs against China and against other nations in the world, are causing a hardship, and actually quite a dangerous hardship, on the American farmer. By the way, whose established suicide rate is now 5 times the general population, according to the Blaze. So, the president's actions cause this hardship upon farmers. So to compensate for the problem that they caused through tariffs, the president and the Republican Party are putting forth a $12 billion aid package to give to farmers who have been hurt by the tariffs. So here's a thought. If you didn't apply the tariffs, you wouldn't have the problem that's going to require you to take $12 billion to solve. Am I crazy? Possibly. Is this a big break between me and the president and the Republican Party at large? Definitely. I support farmers. I live in a rural area. I love living in a rural area. I know a lot of people who work in agriculture. Can't say that I've done so professionally myself. But I do understand cause and effect. And if you remove the cause, you remove the effect, and you don't need to compensate for it. So, what this looks like a hedged bet. And what it looks like to a casual observer like myself, somebody who's willing to think for more than 5 minutes on it at least, is that all China needs to do, and all of our trade foes, if you followed last week's show, like the EU, all they need to do is ride out this situation until the $12 billion runs out. Because right now, at this very moment, should this bill go through, we will be acting in a fashion that is in accordance with Soviet Russia. Let that sink in, if I could borrow a phrase from Paul Joseph Watson. We're acting similarly to a socialist or communist nation. We are subsidizing our farmers to a greater extent than we have in past history. Now, there have been farm aid bills going back until you go blind from looking at the history books. Going back all through American history, there have been farm aid bills that have come out from time to time. Typically, they're limited in scope, and in most cases are due to a drought or due to some sort of natural disaster. Maybe a huge storm wipes out a crop, something like that. There have been farm aid bills going back through the ages of the United States. To my understanding, though, this is the first time we'd have a farm aid bill drafted to compensate for a man-made problem due to a tariff law that has been imposed. Now, feel free to slaughter me in the comments if I'm getting this one wrong. But if the president hadn't imposed the specific tariffs that triggered this retaliatory strike from our trade partners, there would be no need to provide this additional funding to farmers. And the amount of funding that the American people can subsidize out to farms is finite. You can't keep writing those checks forever. You want to talk about corporate welfare? This is agricultural welfare. So from a small government perspective, how do we make this work? How does this fit into your worldview? Now, I've always said, I'm going to call it out when I agree with the president, and I'm going to congratulate him on what I think he does right. I'm going to call him out when I think he's doing wrong. And I think this is wrong. I think subsidizing the American farmer because of a trade war that our government chose to engage in is wrong. You're softening the consequences of your own actions so they don't come back to bite you in the ass. That's all there is to it. Going into 2018's November primaries, President Trump and the Republicans know they need the support of flyover country. They need the deep red Republican states. They need the farmers to not feel this pain. But how will it be in 2019, in 2020, as this trade issue becomes more drawn out? We are playing economic brinksmanship with the EU and with China. Who can outlast the others? Can we outlast China? Can the American farmer withstand what is coming? Can we outlast the EU? I'll say we could probably outlast the EU longer than we can outlast China. And in other very interesting news, it appears that Russia, in a vaguely concerning move, has dumped their holdings in U.S. Treasury securities. We go to the Daily Mail, asking what do they know? Mystery, as Russia has liquidated almost all of its holdings in U.S. Treasury securities during the run-up to the Helsinki summit. In a move labeled unprecedented by experts, Russia slashed their holdings in U.S. Treasuries by 84% from March to May. Country is no longer considered a major holder of treasuries, with just $14.9 billion. That's coming down from $96.1 billion. Got the graph up right now on Facebook Live if you want to check that out. Substantial drop-off, from at one point being up over $160 billion back in 2007. But the Russian Federation has distinctly disinvested itself from the United States economy. So the question is, what do they know? What was discussed with President Trump behind that closed door? Do the Russians see the writing on the wall about our current trade wars? And do they not want to join us in the risks that we're taking? That's something to watch very closely as we go into this first week of August. I'll be staying tuned to that. I would recommend you do the very same. So finally, as we draw the show to a close, kind of closing thoughts, we have to be very, very careful about who our guilt by association is, and who we allow others to associate us with, and how we refute those associations that don't truly exist. UKIP is having a heck of a time right now trying to divorce the world of the notion that they are now an extension arm of Breitbart News and of Steve Bannon. They're having a heck of a time with it. The Democratic Party, depending on who you talk to, is either trying to get closer to the Democratic Socialists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or they're trying to move further away. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is trying to claim she doesn't accept money from corporations, which the Blaze's Chris Enlow thoroughly took apart. The interview with the Daily Show host Trevor Noah. According to campaign finance documents, Ocasio-Cortez raised $861,698.54 during her bid to unseat Joe Crowley. But it doesn't align with what she told Ocasio-Cortez, because her disclosures show, oops, $3,399 from J.P. Morgan Chase, $2,700 from Elevation Partners. Yep. That sounds like corporate donations to me. Just putting that out there. So it's hard to be a socialist when you have capitalists filling your coffers. And it's hard to be an independent party when you have a disgraced populist trying to cozy up to you. So be very, very mindful of who you are associated with involuntarily and who you associate with voluntarily. As we go into 2018 and into 2020, it's going to become very, very difficult to tell the good guys from the bad guys. Because I got news for you. President Trump might have got lit up for this in its context. when he was talking about the Charleston incident. But I'll say right now, in regard to American politics, even global politics as a whole, there are good guys and bad guys on both sides. Completely true. Can I sit here and rattle off a couple names of good Democrats? Not really. I have a hard time doing it because I really, really don't agree with them. But there are a lot of people out there who are Democrats or who are liberals who have a genuine love for their country and simply believe in a different course. Then there are people on the left, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who are seeking to unite the workers of the world and create a socialist paradise. At the same time, on the right, there are people out there who are bigots and racists. There are people out there who believe in a strong man, big government system. But at the same time, they're also patriots. Stand your ground on your principles. But make sure you vet people well. And that your principles are the same. Because very soon we're going to get to a point where the party doesn't matter. The party doesn't matter. Your organization doesn't matter. At the end of the day, only your principles will matter. Now, thank you all for listening to the HoloNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Good night. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America. From Phoenix, Arizona.